Alone on a desolate trail, winding through the unforgiving expanse of the Old West, Cade's sharp eyes caught a sight that stopped him cold. A young Apache boy cruelly nailed to an ancient, battered wagon. A crude wooden sign hung above him, bearing the chilling words, "Rejected White Man." The mixture of horror, disgust, and an unsettling tug of pity clenched at Cade's heart, twisting his gut with questions he dared not answer aloud. The silence around him thickened, heavy with the weight of untold suffering, pulling him deeper into a shadow he wasn't prepared to enter. The trail itself was merciless, a scorched ribbon of cracked earth, slicing through a barren wilderness where the sun blazed with a fury that sucked moisture from every living thing. Dust, dry and choking, rose in lazy swirls, stirred by a restless breeze, mingling with the distant creaking of the old wagon's wooden wheels. No birds dared sing here. No wind carried a kinder sound. Only the endless whisper of desolation filled the air, testing the endurance of any soul brave enough to traverse this forsaken route. Cade was no stranger to the harshness of these lands. His weathered face, etched with lines born of countless storms and battles, betrayed the quiet torment of a man who had long ago buried his youthful dreams beneath layers of grit and survival. He stood motionless, the flicker of his keen gaze taking in the boy's pain, the bruises etched in flesh, the rawness beneath splintered skin, and his own heart warred silently between hardened indifference and the fragile stirrings of compassion. Each second stretched taut, a battle waged within his chest, as memories of past cruelties and promises broken flickered at the edges of his mind. The sign served as a grim symbol, but Cade knew darker truths whispered on the wind. Around them lay recent traces of unrest, scattered horse tracks, hurried footprints pressed deep into the dirt, and, most hauntingly, the faint, sulphurous scent of gunpowder that clung like a ghost. The threat lingered close, an unseen predator circling, waiting for a moment's weakness. To leave the boy there meant condemning him to horrors Cade could scarcely imagine. Yet to intervene risked ensnaring himself in a storm far greater than this forsaken path. The choice weighed on him, silent, perilous, and absolute. With hands both resolute and trembling, beneath a veneer of iron resolve, Cade bent low to the trapped child. Fingers worked swiftly, prying out the cruel nails with gritted teeth, and each clang echoing like the tolling of a distant bell of doom. Sweat beaded on his brow, mingling with dust and grime as seconds bled into agonizing minutes. Then, breaking the near-sacred silence, the unmistakable thunder of horses' hooves rolled over the ridge, hurrying, oppressive, a herald of menace that sliced through hope like a blade. Cade froze mid-motion, the tension snapping taut, every nerve aflame with the knowledge that the tormentors were closing in fast. This was no longer a simple act of mercy. It was the genesis of something monstrous and unknown, a saga forged in shadows that neither Cade nor the boy yet dared to face. Many companions of this wild frontier have told us that fate, much like the treacherous algorithm of this channel, sometimes snatches away subscriptions without warning. Before the next dangerous trail unfolds, and a new twist grips our tale. Glance just below this video and make sure you're still enlisted among our ranks. We wouldn't want you to miss a single voice echoing from these forsaken lands. Check your subscription now and join our saga. Cade's arms trembled under the fragile weight of the boy as he carried him away from the cruel wagon. Each step was measured, silent, as the wind whispered cold warnings through the sparse brush. The young Apache's eyes remained half shut, dull with pain, lips cracked and trembling but offering no sound. His breath was shallow, stolen by wounds that went deeper than the nails piercing his flesh. They reached a hollow pocket in the earth, shielded by twisted mesquite and jagged rocks. A haphazard refuge Cade had fashioned long ago for such desperate nights. He laid the boy gently on a bed of worn blankets scavenged from the wreckage of this forsaken land. The bruises bloomed in ugly purples and blues beneath dusty skin, a tapestry of suffering, stitched by cruelty and abandonment. Cade ripped strips from his own shirt, softening edges before binding the worst of the bleeding wounds, working with patience despite a hardness that gripped his heart. The boy flinched, but did not cry out. Silence enveloped them like an unforgiving shroud. Cade watched the boy's chest rise and fall, noticing a tension so deep it seemed woven into bone, the weight of rejection, carrying the sharp sting of two worlds turned hostile. The boy's heritage marked him as both other and outcast, a banned ghost stumbling on a land scarred by conflict and memory. Cade knew this silence wasn't ignorance, but defense, a fortress raised brick by brick in a life that had eroded trust from its foundations. Cade's own voice broke softly into the still air, gravelly, but devoid of judgment. "You're safe here, for now." The words felt hollow, yet necessary. The boy's eyes flickered open briefly, meeting Cade's gaze with a flicker of suspicion. Or was it recognition? Something fragile sparked, like fire caught between parched twigs, ready to ignite, but uncertain if it would burn or die. The afternoon sun sank lower, bleeding amber light across the tangled brush. Cade settled beside the boy, the weight of loneliness pressing on both their souls. Between them, no promises were spoken. Their bond was forged in silence, raw, reluctant. Cade's fingers traced the crude wooden sign's words etched in his memory. Rejected white man. The bitter irony stung, twisting with every breath the boy took. The frontier was merciless, but this was cruelty dipped in contempt. Cade's jaw clenched, protecting the boy wouldn't be just against the merciless hand of the white settlers. There were dangers closer, darker. Both tribes, strangers, enemies in a dance as old as the land itself, saw the boy as a threat, a scar on fragile alliances. As the horizon darkened, a distant sound pricked the air like a serpent's hiss, hooves pounding unevenly in hurried pursuit. The crackle of dry branches under weighty boots echoed from the ridge. Cade's gaze snapped upward, muscles tense, breath caught tight. The menace was no longer a ghost on the wind, but a storm gathering fast. The boy stirred, eyes wide now with fear, fragile trust shattered in seconds. Cade shifted, blocking the light and shadow coiling in the distance. "They don't want you alive," he muttered, more to himself than the boy. "But I won't let that happen." His hand rested on the barrel of his Colt, calloused and steady. The approaching men were either desperate hunters or wrathful colonists. Their faces unknown, but their intent unmistakable. Cade could hear harsh voices carried faintly on the breeze, shouting names that rang like curses into the fading light. The bleakness of the land stretched beyond their fragile sanctuary. But so did Cade's resolve, hardening with the approaching danger. To save the boy was to invite the storm, a tempest born not just of gunpowder and hate, but of the deep fractures that lacerated this land, this time between man and the boy, born of two worlds. Cade's eyes flicked once, more to the wounded child, whose breath now came in uneasy gasps. The boy looked smaller somehow, diminished not only by pain, but by the invisible chains of rejection pressing in from every side. But Cade saw beyond the surface, a resolve faint and flickering, like embers waiting to catch flame. The sounds grew louder, a chorus of menace closing in. Cade rose, balancing the cruel weight of responsibility and hope. He scanned the horizon one last time, the tracks of horses pressed deep in dirt, the shadows thickening around them both. The air tasted of iron and danger. He whispered a vow no one else could hear. "I'll protect you, whatever comes." But the night was impatient, and from the ridge, the groups. Hoarse shouts split the silence. The next chapter of the boy's fate would be written in blood and gunfire, on a stage where mercy was fragile and survival was a gamble, with death lurking in every shadow. Cade tightened his grip, stepping forward just as the first rifle cracks shattered the stillness. The hunters had arrived. The sharp report of gunfire cracked through the thinning light as Cade rose to meet the threat. He moved with practiced precision, eyes scanning the ridge where shouts and frantic horse hoofbeats pressed closer. The acrid scent of powder mingled with dust and sweat. His Colt slid from its leather holster, steady, unyielding as the man who wielded it. The posse that charged over the hill were rough, desperate men, some collars stained with dirt, others with hatred etched across every creased face. Their weapons glinted under the dying sun. Cade's breath steadied, heartbeat a measured drum matching the tightening knot in the boy's fragile chest. "Stay low," Cade muttered, shifting the boy further behind a jagged mesquite. The boy's pale eyes reflected panic and disbelief, yet tethered to Cade's presence by a thread of silent trust. Bullets tore at the space around them, splintering dry earth and rattling stones. Cade's shots rang true, swift, calculated, scattering the intruders. But the danger was far from over. He caught a glimpse of a snarling man, face twisted by rage, rallying the others for a push. The boy's breath grew ragged, and Cade's gaze softened briefly, lingering on the bruised face and the ribs rising painfully beneath torn fabric. The silent accusation in that crude sign, "Rejected white man," echoed in his mind once more. How had this child become an exile to all worlds? Both white and Apache eyes now sought to snuff out his existence. A harsh cry split through the chaos, a voice not from the posse, but from the shadows beyond the trees. From the underbrush stepped a figure, swift and certain. "Loka, Her eyes flashed with fierce determination, her silhouette framed by fading light. Once a comrade to Cade in battles long past, now an unexpected beacon amid this storm. She moved without hesitation, her hands weaving intricate signs, calling the rushing men's attention with a barked warning shot of her own rifle. "Back!" she called in a voice stamped with command, striking through the din like a thunderclap. The attackers faltered, glancing warily as if uncertain what new danger had entered this relentless game. Cade's lips parted slightly, a rough sigh escaping as Loka approached, urgency blazing behind her steady gaze. She knelt beside the boy, eyes softening as they met his. There was a flicker of recognition, pain mingled with relief. "Who is he?" Cade demanded, leveling a stare at Loka while still watching the retreating enemies. Loka's jaw tightened, the weight of truth settling like a stone in the air between them. "He is something this land can't accept. His mother was Apache, strong and proud, but she loved a white man. That man is dead now." Cade's eyes narrowed. "So he's the enemy to his own people because of where he comes from." "More than that," Loka whispered, face darkening. "Both sides see him as a threat. He carries a bloodline that unsettles the delicate balance. Some Apache want him gone. They call it purity. And the settlers? They fear what he represents, a mixing they cannot abide." The boy shifted, a faint tremor running through his small frame. In his eyes danced shadows, drawn from a history of rejection. Unseen scars, deeper than those flesh wounds Cade tended with rough hands. Cade clenched his jaw. The frontier was no place for mercy. But this child was not just another lost soul. He embodied the fracture inflicted on the land, on the people, and on their tangled legacies. Loka stood, scanning the horizon where echoes of retreat faded, but the danger lingered like a poisonous ghost. "We can't stay here. They will be back, and with more men. We need shelter, somewhere they won't follow," Cade said, his voice low but resolute as he settled the boy more firmly against his chest. "There's a place," Loka said, her eyes flicking with cautious hope. "A small Apache band nearby. Few, but loyal. Maybe they'll offer protection, or at least silence." Cade's fingers tightened reflexively around the boy's ragged clothes. Despite the peril looming, the child's steady pulse whispered fragile life. "We'll take that chance." As the sun dipped beneath the western hills, bleeding bruised colors into the sky, they moved. Each step bore the weight of a future unknown, a path lined with hostility and fraught with peril. Yet within Cade's hardened chest, an ember of defiance sparked anew. The boy's gaze followed the retreating horizon, a tempest of fear and fragile hope swirling behind tired eyes. In that moment, silence stretched between them, a fragile truce forged by survival. But even as they vanished into the creeping dusk, shadows lengthened in the corners of the world, and the war for this boy's soul was far from over. Because in the night, as secrets whispered on the wind, an old friend waited, Loka, with truths ready to break wide open and change everything. The next trial was coming. The small Apache village lay quiet beneath the afternoon sun, its dusty homes huddled together like wary animals seeking shelter. Cade tread carefully, the worn boy cradled close against his chest, each step stirring brittle leaves and the heavy silence among the adobe walls. Beside him, Loka's sharp eyes scanned the wary faces that slowly turned toward them, voices hushed, fingers pausing on weapons hidden beneath sweaters and belts. They entered the heart of the village, where a circle of elders sat on rough-hewn logs, eyes reflecting suspicion like cold steel. The eldest, a gaunt man whose weathered of two worlds, his voice steady but hard. He walks neither path, and his presence fractures the balance we guard. Cade's jaw tightened. He held the boy more firmly, sensing the heavy weight of centuries in the condemnation laid bare. "He's no threat," Cade said quietly, voice rough as gravel. "He's just a boy, wounded and alone." The elder's gaze bore into Cade, unyielding. "If you value peace, you will take him far from here. We cannot, will not, have his blood poisoning our bones." Loka's eyes flashed with quiet anger. "You call him poison? We are all bloodied by this land's wounds. His mother was one of us. If you claim that, then deny your own flesh." A ripple passed through the crowd. Some averted their eyes. Others clenched fists tighter. The fragile peace cracked at the edges, tension thickening the hot air. Cade met the elder's gaze without flinching. "You fear what he represents, but rejection is a blade that cuts deeper than any bullet. He doesn't belong out there, exposed to those who hunt him. And here he's no safer, because neither side claims him." The silence that followed was heavy and raw, filled with the unspoken truths that no one dared voice. The boy shifted, gaze cast down, the sting of otherness etched into every hesitant breath. Without awaiting further judgment, the leader motioned sharply to two stooped men nearby. "Prepare to send him away, for his sake and ours." Loka stepped forward, voice ringing steady despite the uneasy murmurs building around them. "Then send me with him. I'll be his shield as long as breath carries me. His fight is not yet finished here." The elder's mouth tightened, lips pursing. After a beat, a reluctant nod was given. "Very well, but trust will not come easy. Watch closely, for false friends wear familiar faces." As shadows lengthened, draped with heat and suspicion, the fragile sanctuary dissolved further. Word traveled like wildfire. The village would not shelter the boy forever. Whispers of fanatic colonists gathering nearby filtered through the wind, their growing numbers fueled by rage and a fear of impurity they sought to erase with violence. Cade and Loka moved through the camp with purpose, tension biting at the air. The boy, silent as ever but wide-eyed, stumbled behind them, his small hands clenched into fists, the marks of rejection clenched tight in memory. Night fell like a shroud over the village. Stars blinked cold and distant, uncaring of human strife. Before sleep could claim them, the sudden stir of movement stirred Cade's instincts, sharp and unforgiving. "Where is he?" Cade's voice was low, urgent, slicing the murmurs of restless warriors. They rushed to the boy's sleeping mat, now empty, the blankets tangled and cold in the moon's pale light. Loka's breath caught, sharp and fearful. No footprints nearby. Someone took him before dawn. Cade's hands clenched, nails pressing into calloused skin. Betrayal had slithered into their midst, invisible but deadly. The boy's absence carved a hollow. "Ache deep in the night. Traitors among us," Cade muttered, eyes narrowing despite the dark. "Or worse, a pact with those who hunt him." The camp erupted into whispers and hurried footsteps, suspicion fracturing the fragile trust they had fought to build. Faces once guarded, now turned accusing. Alliances fragile as spider silk. Loka knelt in the dust where the boy had slept, fingers brushing his faded footprints, the fragile trace of hope snatched away beneath the veil of night. Cade's gaze scanned the perimeter, senses honed by years on the frontier. Somewhere beyond the firelight, danger lurked. Closer, more treacherous than ever before. The boy was lost to them now, stolen by forces allied in shadow or desperation. A harsh wind kicked up dust and dry leaves, carrying with it the bitter scent of betrayal. "We find him," Cade said with steady resolve, "no matter the cost." But beneath his vow lay a deeper truth stirring. This was no longer just a hunt. It was a descent into a darkness, woven by hatred, fear, and secrets that would claw at them all. The night swallowed the camp's whispers as new fears settled like ash. And somewhere beyond the hills, beneath the cold glare of an unforgiving moon, the boy slipped deeper into the shadow of enemies, unknown and unyielding. The bleak landscape stretched before them, a scarred wilderness where hope seemed a stranger. Cade's breath came ragged, each step a weight carried on aching limbs. The boy, small, fragile, was nestled against his chest, wrapped in threadbare cloth stained with dirt and blood. Their shadows, long and twisted, chased each other beneath the merciless sky. Loka's footsteps echoed softly behind them, steady and purposeful. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew these lands, not just their dirt and rocks, but the bitter history etched into every ridge and hollow. Her eyes were sharp, scanning, always alert to the dangers that waited unseen. "Hold fast," Cade muttered, more to himself than the boy. The boy's pale face was turned away, eyes fixed on the ground ahead, but shoulders tensed as if bracing against invisible blows. The cruelty marked on him was not just of flesh. It was woven deep into the fabric of his very being. Both white settlers and Apache radicals had painted him as a threat, a symbol of something forbidden, something to be purged. Their path led into a dry, unforgiving expanse, the kind of land that held no mercy for the weak or the broken. Cade's skin prickled under the sun's unforgiving gaze, his thoughts tangled with memories he'd kept carefully buried. He was a man forged in the fires of frontier mercilessness, a pistolero hardened by years of grit and blood. Yet, as he carried this forsaken boy, those hardened layers began to chip. Why did they mark him again? Loka's voice cut through the silence, both question and accusation. You know as well as I do that rejected white man was not enough for them. Cade's jaw clenched. They want to erase what he is, to make him invisible or dead. He carries a weight they cannot bear, and they will do anything to crush it. The trail narrowed, twisting around jagged boulders and thorny scrub. Cade's eyes caught the telltale signs of a trap, Broken branches bent unnaturally, shallow footprints pressed hard into dust. The boy shifted in his arms, a faint whimper breaking the stubborn silence. Cade tightened his grip, his fingers bruising through the ragged cloth. "We're close," Loka said, urgency rolling beneath her steady tone. "He's been moved, taken east, towards the Badlands. That territory belongs to the more violent factions, among both the settlers and the APC. Her gaze hardened. No mercy waits there. The afternoon air grew heavier, oppressive with the promise of coming violence. Cade's mind lashed with doubts, a swirling storm of responsibility, fear, and the gnawing question of his own nature. He had long identified as a lone gunman, a man who dealt in survival and cold pragmatism. But this boy, caught between worlds and hunted for the legacy of a union society refused to accept, stirred something Cade refused to name. "We can't let them break what little is left of him," Cade said, voice low and fierce. "But protecting him means walking through hell." As if the land itself responded, the sharp crack of rifle fire shattered the brittle quiet. They ducked instinctively, the boy's small body trembling against Cade's chest. From the ridge, a shadowed group poured like vultures descending, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. "Ambushed," Cade growled. "They're coming for us, no mistake." Pain shot through his side, a deep searing burn where a bullet grazed flesh. He staggered, clutching the wound, teeth gritted against the shock. The boy whimpered, eyes wide with terror. Loka drew her own weapon, firing rapid, precise shots that echoed like thunder across the rocks. "Move," she commanded, pulling Cade behind a cluster of thorny bushes. "They mean to kill, to finish the job before it begins." Under the unforgiving sun, the battle raged with desperate fury. Cade fired despite the burning agony in his ribs, shielding the boy at every turn. His mind spun, not with strategy, but with memories of his own past, ghosts he'd once buried beneath a facade of solitude and steel. The violence of frontier justice had shaped him. It had also blinded him. Now, carrying this fragile soul, he confronted the ugliness of his own prejudices. "Why do I fight for him?" Cade whispered through clenched teeth. "He's not my blood, but damn it, he's human. More human than those who brand him a monster." The attackers pressed forward with relentless cruelty, arrows and bullets ripping the air. Cade felt a sudden, searing pain as another shot found its mark. His body faltered, knees buckling as blood blossomed between his fingers. The boy cried out suddenly, a sharp, desperate sound that cut into the chaos. "Stay with me," Loka urged, cradling Cade's head gently despite the madness around them. She loosed another shot, eyes blazing with defiance. "This ends now. They won't take him, not while we breathe." Yet the weight of the past, the cruelty of two worlds rejecting one lost child, pressed down harder than any bullet. Cade's vision blurred, every breath a battle. He fought not just for survival, but for the boy's chance at something more, even if it meant shattering the man he had become. The last echo of gunfire faded into an ominous silence, broken only by Cade's labored breathing. Around them, the dust settled on shattered hopes and the bitter taste of sacrifice. The boy's small fingers clung weakly to Cade's own, trembling, but Alive. Hold on, Cade rasped, eyes struggling to focus on the threatening figures retreating beyond the ridge. I won't let them win. But the wound burned deep and his strength waned. As the shadows crept long, the enemy regrouped, sharpening their hatred like knives. Their hunt was far from over. Darkness was closing in. They were about to be caught in a storm far deadlier than bullets. And Cade's body gave way. Hit, broken, but standing for the boy's fragile life. The attack was only the beginning. The air in the abandoned fortress lay thick with dust and secrets. The fading light casting long shadows across crumbling stone walls. Loka moved swiftly, her steps confident despite the ruinous silence that clung like a shroud. Beside her, Cade's breathing was shallow but steady, his body battered and bruised yet unwavering. Between them, the boy remained huddled, pale and trembling, a fragile ember flickering in the dusk. The fortress was a relic of forgotten wars, a place where old alliances had been forged and broken beneath the weight of blood and betrayal. Now, it served as their last refuge, a fragile sanctuary against the growing storm outside. Loka's eyes swept the dim corridors, alert to every creak and whisper that threaded through the stillness. She whispered words of ancient comfort in her native tongue, a litany meant to calm and protect, not just for the boy, but for the wounds beneath Cade's hardened skin. "We can't stay long," Loka murmured, her voice low and steady, though shadows of doubt flickered across her face. "They'll find us soon enough. The boy's blood calls to them, whispering secrets we cannot ignore." Cade shifted, wincing as a sharp pain stabbed through his ribs. He gritted his teeth, masking the swell of vulnerability that threatened to break free. "I'm stronger than I look," he muttered, voice rough with pain and fatigue. "But you're right. They won't stop." The boy, silent until now, clutched Cade's shirt in trembling fingers. His eyes, wide and unblinking, held storms of past torment and an intangible fear of what was coming. He was caught between worlds, neither accepted fully in the harsh realities of white settlers, nor the unforgiving traditions of his mother's people. A nameless struggle waged behind those young eyes, a longing for belonging that seemed as unreachable as the fading stars overhead. Loka knelt beside them, her hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder. "You must know," she said quietly. "This place holds echoes of old wounds, tales of betrayal long buried but never healed. Your bloodline, it binds you to those stories." Cade's gaze sharpened. "What kind of stories?" "Legends," Loka replied. "Of kin torn apart by hatred, of promises broken and lives lost to the thirst for purity. Your father, your mother, their union is a spark in a powder keg. That's why you're hunted." The weight of this truth settled over them like the gathering night. Cade felt the history. Not as tales, but as scars engraved on the land itself. Invisible, yet unforgiving. He looked down at the boy, whose fragile form barely stirred beneath his heavy coat. "You won't be alone in this," he said fiercely. "Not while I breathe." A sudden sound shattered the fragile quiet, a faint but unmistakable shuffle near the entrance. Cade's hand moved instinctively toward his Colt, but he was too slow. From the shadows stepped a figure, tall and lean, his eyes cold and unyielding. His face bore the marks of countless battles. A harsh line of determination carved into flesh and bone. The stranger's voice cut through the stillness like a blade. The boy belongs to the old ways, to those who would see impurity cast out before it breeds. I am the bloodhound of those promises, the reckoning for what should not be. His eyes flicked between Cade and Loka, hardened with unshakable belief. Step aside, or be swept away. For a heartbeat, the air held its breath, the weight of history pressing down, thick and suffocating. Cade rose to his full height, despite the sharp sting that pulsed in his side. You'll find no easy victory here. Loka's hand moved over her rifle. This child is under my protection. You bring the past, but we bring the future. The boy's gaze met the stranger's, no longer cowering, but burning with a quiet steel. In that moment, something shifted, a fragile defiance kindling within. The stranger sneered, taking a step forward. You do not understand what you carry. The blood that defiles, the legacy that curses. I will claim him, for the sake of the tribe, for the purity they demand. Loka's fingers tightened on her weapon. You might be a legend, but here, now, you face the truth of survival. This boy is not yours to claim. The tension thickened, electric and unforgiving. Shadows twisted like living things along the fortress walls, as if the ancient stones themselves remembered the betrayals and battles long past. Cade's voice cut through the standoff, steady and hard. This ends tonight. If you want him, you'll have to come through us. The stranger's eyes flicked briefly over the trio, over the scarred man, the fierce woman, and the boy who embodied more danger than bullets ever could. So be it, he growled. A cold wind swept through the broken halls, carrying with it the whispers of 1,000 broken promises. The old world had come to claim its reckoning, and outside, beneath the blood-red horizon, the hunt was only beginning. The air in the fortress grew heavy with unease, the shadows of the crumbling walls casting long, eerie shapes as Cade and Loka stood protectively close to the boy. Their breaths mingled with the fading light, while the tension between them and the mysterious figure thickened, all under the watchful veil of nightfall. The stranger's voice cut with chilling certainty. I am the bloodhound of those promises, the reckoning for what should not be. His gaze, like cold steel, fixed upon the boy with a mixture of contempt and obsession. Your bloodline defiles the tribe's purity. It is my burden to erase such impurity for the honor of those who came before. Cade's eyes narrowed, the sharp sting in his ribs forgotten amid the gravity of the moment. You won't find easy victory here, he said, voice low but unwavering. This boy is under my protection. Loka stepped forward, rifle poised, her gaze fierce and unyielding. His life is not yours to claim. The old world clings to its shadows, but we carry the dawn. This child is more than a mark of incorrect blood. He is hope. The boy, usually silent and withdrawn, lifted his head finally. His eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and pain, burned with quiet defiance. A strength stirred within him, as fragile as a candle's flame, yet impossible to ignore. I will not be owned by hate or fear, he said, voice trembling but clear. I am more than what you fear. The stranger's lip curled into a sneer. You do not understand the weight you carry. The tribe's balance depends on purity. You unbalance what was meant to last. Loka's hand tightened on the rifle's stock. The balance you speak of was broken long ago by hatred and closed minds. This boy is not the fracture. He is the possibility of healing. A gust of wind swept through the ruin, stirring dust and ancient memories like restless ghosts. The stranger's eyes flicked between Cade, Loka, and the boy, calculating, searching for weakness. Then he spoke again, voice void of mercy. If you refuse to yield, then prepare to be swept aside. The three braced themselves as the fortress walls seemed to close in. The past's bitter grievances, ancient and raw, swirled in the thickening air. Cade's hand instinctively brushed the worn Colt at his hip, while Loka's fingers tightened on her rifle, and the boy, caught between sword and shadow, held his ground, no longer merely a hunted child, but a spark of rebellion against the world's merciless laws. Then, amid the charged quiet, the boy exhaled slowly and whispered something that silenced even the stranger's defiant glare. There is more in my blood than hate, a secret that neither tribes nor settlers dare speak. Cade's gaze caught the boy's, sharp and questioning. What secret? He asked, voice taut with urgency. The boy's lips pressed into a thin line, then parted cautiously. My father was not just any white man. He was a man of the land, and of a promise that could bind us together or tear us apart forever. The stranger's face paled ever so slightly, the flicker of fear poorly masked beneath his resolute exterior. Loka's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and caution clouding her fierce expression. The boy pressed on, voice gaining strength. This secret, it could change the rules of the game. It frightens those who want to keep us divided, because it speaks of unity and power not bound by bloodlines, but by choice and courage. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. The old wounds of the land seemed to hold their breath, waiting. Then the man, the self-proclaimed bloodhound of purity, took a step back, voice low and sharp. If what you say is true, then I must claim the boy before the secret surfaces, for the tribe and for what should never be known. Cade squared his shoulders. We're not going anywhere, not until you answer for your hatred and the violence it breeds. Loka nodded. You came for a monster, but you found a family, and families fight to protect each other. The boy looked between them. The weight of his heritage and the burden of his hidden truth settled deep in his young heart. Yet something had changed. Not just the hunter's cold stare, but the currents swirling around them all. A new reckoning had begun. Outside, the fortress loomed like a silent witness to this fragile, fierce stand. The lines between legacy and future blurred. The war over blood and belonging was no longer just a fight over the boy. It was a war over what the land itself could become. As the stranger's eyes darkened with renewed resolve, the battlefield shifted from gunfire to something far more dangerous. The truth unspoken, the power hidden, and the fragile hope that a new path might be forged from ancient hate. And beneath the cold horizon, the shadows lengthened, waiting for the next move in a deadly game. one that could change everything for the boy, and for all who dared to believe in a future beyond rejection. The air crackled with tension as Cade, Loka, and the boy crouched beneath the twisted limbs of gnarled mesquite, their breaths shallow and voices swallowed by the barren land. They had spent days preparing, carefully laying traps, choosing vantage points among the rocky outcrops and thorny brush. The boy's pale eyes, once dull and haunted, now flickered with a fierce determination honed through pain and rejection. Cade sensed the fragile ember within him growing stronger, fueled by a will not yet broken. "This, is it?" Cade whispered, voice ragged but steady. "They think they can come for us like prey? We'll show them otherwise." He ran his fingers along the worn handle of his Colt, the cold metal steadying his nerves. Loka's hand rested firmly on her rifle, her stance impossibly still, every muscle coiled to spring. The sun dipped low, bleeding orange light across the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched like reaching fingers over the cracked earth. From their hidden refuge, Cade's sharp eyes caught the faint outline of riders cresting a ridge, hooded figures armed, moving with brutal intent. The enemy was near, and this time there would be no running. Loka's voice was low but resolute. "They don't expect us to stand our ground. They think we're easy prey, just a broken man carrying a ghost child." Her eyes met Cade's unflinching. "But we have something they don't. Our wits, our courage, and his fire. We fight not just for survival, but for the future he deserves." The boy shifted beside them, fingers clutching a jagged stone with white-knuckled grip. "I'm ready," he said, voice trembling but clear. "Let them come." For the first time, he claimed his own strength. A silent vow echoed in the hard set of his jaw. Cade nodded grimly. "Then let's make this fight count." As the riders closed the distance, a sudden rustle in the underbrush betrayed the patrol's proximity. Cade took a breath, then unleashed the first shot, a crack, sharp, against the evening stillness. The bullet snagged the lead horse's flank, tossing its rider into chaos. Shouts erupted as the attackers scattered, momentarily disoriented. From the shadows, Loka released a rapid volley, each bullet finding flesh or horsehide, knitting a deadly curtain that slowed the onslaught. "Hold here. Protect the boy," she commanded, voice slicing through the din like steel. But the attackers were relentless. From the east, a second wave emerged, their faces twisted with fanatic hate, weapons glinting cold in the failing light. They recognized the boy's significance. He was a symbol of everything their blinded hearts feared and sought to destroy. The boy's breath hitched as a stray arrow thudded into the earth, mere inches from his trembling hand. Cade moved like a shadow, a shield before the boy, taking the full brunt of an incoming bullet that splintered wood at his feet. Pain blossomed hot and sharp through his shoulder, but he stayed upright, unyielding. "Keep firing," Cade urged, voice hoarse. "We don't have the luxury of fear." Loka's fierce eyes never left the fray. "They want to break us, to make sure he never dreams of belonging anywhere. We're the last line." Each shot felt like a prayer, each moment an unforgiving test of resolve. The boy, once silent, began to murmur words of encouragement, not loud, but in the quiet spaces between gunfire. a litany of newfound strength wrapped in whispered breaths. As the battle raged, unexpected allies materialized from the twisted thickets. APACHE, warriors loyal to Loka, their faces painted with war colors, moving like deadly specters to flank the assailants. Their sudden arrival cut through the enemy ranks, forcing a disorganized retreat, shaking the hillside. Cade sank briefly against a sun-baked rock, wincing as blood seeped through his torn shirt. But his eyes burned bright with hard-won victory. The boy stood beside him now, no longer a symbol of rejection, but a spark of defiant hope, dragged from the edge of oblivion and set aflame by those who chose to protect him. But the fight was far from over. As the dust settled and the rallying cries faded, Cade's gaze fixed on the horizon, where a dark silhouette emerged. Tall, unyielding, the embodiment of the hatred that had chased them from the start. The cold gaze of the pure-blood hunter sliced through the twilight, eyes locking on the trio, with the certainty of a predator shutting in on its prey. Cade's grip tightened around his Colt. This isn't finished. Not by a long shot. Loka's voice was steady steel. He's coming, and this time, it's a fight to the death. The boy met the hunter's gaze, unflinching, the fire in his eyes now ablaze. The clash between past and future was about to ignite, and Cade knew the choice he made now would shatter everything he'd ever believed. The last stand was near, and the frontier held its breath. The sun dipped low behind the jagged ridges as the lone silhouette of Cade steadied himself, every breath a battle against the searing pain tearing through his side. Blood seeped from torn flesh, staining the parched earth beneath him. But his grip on the worn Colt remained unyielding, a last vestige of strength, guarding the fragile hope cradled close to his chest. Beside him, Loka's eyes burned fierce and unbroken, unwavering as the boy's pale gaze locked onto the approaching shadow that darkened the horizon. The figure that emerged was more shadow than man, a hunter forged by bitterness and hate, the relentless embodiment of a past that refused to die. His steely eyes cut through the dusty twilight, piercing Cade with a cold certainty that this final reckoning could not be avoided. Every muscle tensed. The air thickened with promise of violence, but deeper than that, it carried the weight of legacies, bitter, tangled, and fragile. "You don't belong here," the hunter spat, voice sharp like flint scraping stone. "Your blood is an abomination we swore to cleanse." The boy's lips pressed into a defiant line, the flicker of fear seeding to a solemn fire. "I am neither your shame nor your fear," he said, voice steady, though trembling beneath the burden. "I am proof that this land holds more than hate." Cade took a shaky step forward, pain ripping through his ribs like a jagged knife, but his resolve did not falter. "This ends tonight," he growled. "Not with your vengeance, but with the future we make, one where such hatred dies with you." Loka's fingers tightened around her rifle, her gaze a wall of iron as the hunter raised his weapon. The boy, once silent and broken, straightened with a courage born from a lifetime of rejection. The ground seemed to hold its breath. The first shot shattered the silence, a crack that echoed like a death knell. Cade moved instinctively, parrying fate with skill forged in years of hardship. Bullets tore through dust and stone, but the first to fall was the hunter. Struck by Loka's unerring aim, he stumbled, rage flaring in eyes now clouded with disbelief. But the battle was more than gunsmoke and blood. As the hunter groaned, clutching his wound, the boy stepped forward, voice rising, clear and resolute. "My blood is not a curse. It is the promise of change. My father's legacy, the man who loved beyond fear, who dreamed of unity, lives in me." The words cut through the darkness that had settled like a shroud over this broken land. The hunter, defeated but defiant, spat blood and bitterness. "Then you must bear the price of your birth, the exile of your own people." Before violence could return, a hush fell upon the ruined fortress. From the shadowed corners, a slow shifting of shapes, the echo of footsteps both measured and cautious. Figures emerged, faces weathered by hardship, but eyes softened by understanding. The elders of the tribes stepped forward, their harsh expressions giving way to reluctant acceptance. The eldest, his voice gravelly but measured, spoke, "You speak of promises and change, child. Blood binds us, but so must hope. There is truth in what you say, a truth we have feared and denied." He looked to his people, eyes lingering on the boy. "If the past is to bleed no further, this child must become the bridge, not the barrier." Loka stepped beside Cade and the boy, her presence fierce and unwavering. "He carries the scars of all our failings," she said softly, "but within him is the possibility for healing." A silence stretched, fragile yet profound, as the weight of centuries settled into something new, an unspoken vow whispered through the ancient stones. Cade's gaze softened, despite the ache coursing through him. "You are not alone anymore," he said quietly to the boy. "Your story doesn't end with rejection. It begins with us." The boy's eyes shimmered with tears, caught in the fading light, a release of pain that had long been kept locked within. "I want to belong," he whispered, "not to either side, but to something new, a place where I can be whole." As night fell over the fortress, the harsh lines of old wounds slowly blurred. The embers of hatred began to cool beneath the steady breath of new understanding and the promise that shattered barriers could be rebuilt into something stronger. In the stillness, Cade's battered body gave way to exhaustion, yet his spirit stood tall, fulfilled by a fight won not just with gunfire, but with the courage to embrace change. Loka, ever watchful, guided the boy gently, their steps echoing a future born from the ruins of a fractured past. Beyond the rugged cliffs, beneath the wide-open sky dusted with stars, a new kind of community began to take root. One formed not from purity or rejection, but from acceptance, hope, and the hard-earned wisdom of broken souls who dared to dream beyond fear. The boy, once nailed to a wagon and marked as rejected, now carried a different sign, one of defiance, resilience, and belonging. The frontier held its breath no longer. The war for hate had ended, and in its place, a fragile peace was born from the flames. The saga, at last, came to rest.